Hey everybody, welcome back to Appa's Kitchen. Today I'm going to try to make some nice Italian rolls. I tried this recipe a few weeks ago when I made my bean soup and they're really good. It's really the perfect recipe. It's what I've been looking for good sandwich rolls. The problem is I didn't really get the rolling technique right. So when I cut the rolls, they kind of fell apart. I really needed to roll them a little bit tighter. So I'm going to try again. It's a really simple recipe, just a few steps involved. Simple ingredients, just yeast, flour, and water, a little bit of salt. So we don't really need to go over the ingredients. I'm just going to take you to the counter and I'll show you how it all comes together. Fingers crossed that these are going to be the best sandwich rolls ever. Okay, so I have yeast. This is instant dry yeast, but it's a little bit old. I got this during the pandemic, so I'm going to proof it. I have a cup and a half of water here. It is from the tap, hot water from the tap, and it's coming in at about 108 degrees. So I want my water temperature to be around 100, so that's perfect. And then I have bread flour and salt. So the first thing I'm going to do is add about 2¼ teaspoons of yeast. That would be one package of yeast. I don't know if you remember during the pandemic, everybody got into baking, so yeast was really hard to find. So I ended up buying this big package. It's going to take me about 10 years to use it. All right, so there's a 2¼ teaspoons of yeast, a cup and a half of warm water. Just give that a little stir, and I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes. Until it starts to bubble. That's how I know that the yeast is still good. I know it is good because I just used it, but I always like to do this step just in case. All right, so I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then I'll just add the flour and the salt, mix it, and then the rest is just time. Okay. Okay, so the yeast has been sitting for about 5 minutes. It smells great. I can definitely smell it, and you can see some little bubbles coming up. It's just such a beautiful reaction as the yeast starts to come back to life. So at this point, I'm going to add my flour. I have 4 cups of flour plus, it's supposed to be 4¼ cups. I was too lazy to measure out a quarter, so I just filled my measuring cup to the top. So I'm going to mix my flour in with the yeast. I also added salt to the flour and mixed it up. I don't have a fancy mixer, so I'm using something that's called a hand to mix the dough. And I'm just going to try to mix it in the bowl as much as I can, and then eventually I will turn it out to the pastry board and continue kneading it for 5 minutes. But right now I'm trying to incorporate as much of the flour, mix it together as much as possible before I turn it out onto the pastry board. Working the dough for about a minute or so, it's really starting to come together now. Get these little bits off of my hand. And then I'm going to turn it out onto the pastry board and continue to knead it. So kneading, you're just pressing it down with your palm, pulling it back, pressing it down, pulling it back. And in the beginning, it might not feel like it's going to come together, but just be patient with it, keep working it. Okay, so I have been kneading the dough for about 5 minutes. It came together really nicely. And next I'm going to put it back in my bowl. Cover it with some oil. So that it doesn't dry out. I'm just using safflower oil. I guess you could use olive oil. And then I'm going to put a lid on it, just a plate, and pop it in the oven. I turned the oven on for just a few minutes and then turned it off. So it's just going to be a nice, warm, stable environment for the dough to rise for about an hour and a half. Okay, my dough has been rising for an hour and a half. Looks beautiful. I'm just going to punch it down a little bit. It feels so nice and soft. Great. Smells great. So now I'm just going to form it into a rectangle. And cut it into 6 equal parts. So first we'll just cut it down the center. And then, let's see, I think I'll go about there and about there. So not exactly equal, but close enough. And then we just want to roll these 6 pieces into balls. I can see that some of them are going to be a little bit bigger and the others, but that's okay. This is not a professional bakery operation we got going on here. I don't want anybody to be intimidated and think that you can't do something. If I can do it, you can do it. All right. So I'm going to let these balls rest. I'm going to cover them up, let them rest for about 15 minutes, and then form them into rolls. The dough has been resting for about 15 minutes, covered. Make sure you cover it so it doesn't dry out. So the next thing we want to do is flatten it out into an oblong shape. Then I'm going to roll it. I never realized rolls were called rolls because you roll them. Is that why they're called rolls? All right, so this is where I ran into a problem before. You see the way that this is kind of, it almost looks like a croissant. You want to make sure that you really roll it so that the dough is like formed together. All right, so it's sealed there. And then I'm going to roll down on the ends to kind of give it that roll shape. So we have some pointy tips. Let's just say I'm still working on my technique here, but that looks pretty good. All right, and then I'm going to put this on my baking sheet, which I have a piece of parchment paper on, and I'm going to let them rise for another hour. Before I pop them in the oven. Okay, so one more time, kind of make it into a rectangle, oblong, oval shape, and then roll it. Then really roll it out, seal it together, press down on the ends. Voila, that's beautiful. Okay, my bread is rolled out, and I can see that I have all different sizes here. This one is really big. This one is really thin. Okay, still working on this. Now I'm going to cover them up, and I'm going to put them in my laundry area because I just did laundry. So it's nice and warm from the dryer running because it is a cold Bay Area day here today. So I'm going to stick them in there for an hour and let them rise and then pop them in the oven. My rolls have been rising for an hour. I thought they would be bigger than this. All right, so they're going to be kind of thin rolls. I think I need to work on my technique here. So a couple things I want to do. First, I'm going to just make a slit in them and then spray them with water before I pop them in the oven. The oven is heated now at 450. I don't have a really sharp knife. It'd probably be a good idea to get some kind of a X-Acto blade or something to do this, but all right, and then I'm just going to spray them. This is just plain water. The oven, they go, there's a pan of water in the oven that's also been heating up. So that's going to create a nice steamy environment. So 10 minutes, I'm going to then turn them around, spray them again, and bake them for another 10 minutes. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. You can see the steam coming out of the oven. I'm just gonna, oh, my rolls have gotten bigger. All right, so I'm gonna turn them around. That one on the end looks really nice. That one. Give them another spritz of water. So the water helps to crisp them up somehow. Sorry, I'm not a scientist, so I don't really know what I'm doing here. Scientifically, put them back in the oven for another 10 minutes. My rolls are done. So unfortunately, they're all different sizes. It's like I have a family here, daddy, mommy, and the 4 kids. They're nice and crusty, crunchy on the outside, and I know they're going to be beautifully soft inside. I'm not going to cut them yet because they're still hot. So I'm going to let them cool, and I'm going to make a little chicken cutlet sandwich for dinner.